Derek began to speed walk, moving quickly but smoothly to not jostle his brother too much. You had to keep up a good pace to not be left behind. There was no dawdling and no distractions, despite the best attempts on the boardwalk to draw its guests' attention with dazzling displays and enthusiastic employees. Derek might as well have been walking through an empty hall. You followed your friend down the line of stores and peeked into restaurant windows, but there was no sign of the parents. Your steps started to slow down as you checked another side of the massive boardwalk.
This might take longer than I thought.
But
It'll be alright.
He kept upbeat as he pressed his face into yet another window. Still nothing. It's good that you have at least 4 eyes looking for the parents now.
Maybe Jorge and Elizabeth will have time to ride the roller coaster twice. It's not like that'd be horrible for them. Though...
There, his enthusiasm flagged a little.
that's a bummer.
It does suck that you're stuck with this. Sorry.
I'm not stuck anywhere. I'm spending time with you.
Thanks.
He blushed and busied himself, peering into the next restaurant. After a bit more searching, Derek spoke again.
So,
Do you like roller coasters or are you scared of them?
I didn't actually go on my first roller coaster until I was 17, but I always wanted to, and I love roller coasters. I think roller coasters are great. The corners of Derek's lips raised.
We'll have to ride it together later. Elizabeth and Jorge can deal with going again.
His response made you glad that you were friends.
Actually, my family really likes going to amusement parks. I've been to this boardwalk probably more than 5 times, and we've gone to other places. Some have a lot more ride options. Oh, and water parks too.
He continued chatting along about his favorite water park as he searched down the boardwalk.
There are slides and lazy rivers and those giant buckets that dump water on you.
That's amazing.
It's nothing.
He dismissed your amazement, flustered, and sped up his pace.
And you have plenty of time to catch up. You can keep coming along with my family.
You listened carefully as he recounted his past theme park excursions. He ranked them on attractions, wait time, and stuff to keep younger family members entertained. With the conversation light, you both laughed and smiled as you walked.
Wait!
He stopped in his tracks. Nicholas lightly thumped against his chest at the sudden loss of momentum. Derek readjusted him, and luckily Nicholas stayed asleep.
I totally forgot we were supposed to be finding our parents. I wasn't even looking anywhere.
He shook his head to refocus. You agreed that you had gotten just a little distracted. With that reminder, you both continued searching. Sleeping Beauty occasionally let out a snore, but other than that, Nicholas didn't contribute to the quest. You wandered all around the boardwalk, eyes peeled for any sign of your parents. Good lord. The sky turned golden as the sun began to disappear under the horizon. You glanced out to the sea, and it looked as if the ocean was swallowing the day. Lights began to click on, and the already shiny buildings of the boardwalk were set aglow. You took a moment to absorb the sunset. It was nice to take a breath and ignore the noisy backdrop. I can't believe it's taken us this long. It was then that you finally got an answer to your mystery. No wonder you hadn't noticed before. You gasped out loud. Derek automatically turned to look. He squinted into the distance before he dropped his jaw. As soon as he understood, he blurted out his shock.
They rented bikes?
Oh man, well, across the way, pedaling along, the 2 pairs of parents were having a lovely double date. You know, good for them, though. They were far enough away that you couldn't see much more than their helmets, but you could tell that Mom was laughing about something with her head thrown back.
That explains that.
He muttered under his breath in frustration. He gritted his teeth as the annoyance drained. The cold truth hit him and he whispered, defeated.
They can't take Nicholas on a bike.
Derek shrunk in on himself. He's their kid. They have to take him. What are we gonna do? Derek's eyes flicked over to yours, wide and distressed. He turned back to the bikes. The parents were blissfully unaware that you were even there. Finally, he let out a tired breath that was dangerously close to a sigh. His shoulders drooped enough to visibly lower Nicholas.
I can't do it. I can't give him to them.
Derek. Derek flinched and worried his lip. But not one to keep the mood down, Derek tried to shake it off. A soft smile pulled at his face. He faced the sun and spoke into the slowly disappearing light.
It's just one of those things. It happens.
Nicholas twitched in his deep sleep, and Derek pulled him closer. You remember Derek saying that before, when he was worried about not being able to attend the party. The it didn't happen last time, but he wasn't so lucky today.
I've got a plan.
You waited for him to continue. With every word, more confidence filled his demeanor.
We should go see Elizabeth and Jorge. They must be going crazy wondering where we are.
I'm still concerned, though. Was it really okay? Sure, going back to the rest of the group made sense. What else could you do if Derek refused to approach his parents, but you still hadn't solved the Nicholas problem? You worried that this wasn't going to turn out the best for your friend. All right. You backtracked to the roller coaster. Derek was shuffling behind you. He'd slowed down from his bustling pace earlier. He had to be tired. Beside the sign that let you measure if you were tall enough to ride the roller coaster, Elizabeth stood with folded arms and Jorge waved. You waved back at the two. Elizabeth and Jorge walked over and met you halfway.
Hey.
He scuffed one of his shoes on the ground. He felt the weight of Elizabeth's gaze and let out a nervous chuckle. He shrugged as if to say, yeah, the parents' plan didn't work out.
Sorry for taking so long. There was sort of a problem.
Duh.
Nicholas snuffled into Derek's shirt as he snored. Before she or Jorge could ask for more details, Derek jumped in with the other idea he'd hinted at.
I'm gonna hold Nicholas until it's time to go home. The rest of you can keep having fun. Go wherever you want.
Jorge uncomfortably pulled at his shirt, stretching the fabric at its seams.
I don't want to go. I want to help.
He visibly felt bad about all of this being put on Derek. You got the impression that if Jorge was a little bigger, that he'd offer to take a turn holding his baby brother instead.
No.
It's okay. I'll be fine. You really shouldn't waste all your time standing around with me. Plus, then who would help Elizabeth and Molly around the boardwalk? They haven't been here before. You know this place and can make sure they don't get lost or don't miss the good parts.
Jorge turned to you and Elizabeth, but hesitated with his answer.
It would help me to know we didn't send them off alone. They're our guests, right? Okay. Thanks, Jorge.
Derek leaned closer to Elizabeth and whispered,
I don't want Jorge to miss out on the boardwalk because of Nicholas or because of me. Please, go take him and have some fun.
Elizabeth and Derek made eye contact, and for all you could figure, they had some sort of eldest sibling telepathy going on. That was the only way you could explain it, because rather than arguing, she agreed to work with Derek. I'll do it. Elizabeth then pressed her lips together and considered you. She snorted and then lightly flicked your nose. But I don't need Molly with me. Jorge isn't a pain. Derek's brows creased, not expecting that. Uh-huh. I like this one, actually. Right. I'll handle taking Derek out for some fun. Good. I thought you could do something useful.
Molly.
Derek's voice was strangled and hushed.
You don't have to.
What about you? Why does it have to be just you? You could have suggested we take turns watching Nicholas. Exactly, that's what I was kind of hoping would happen. Derek shook his head and you felt your stubbornness spark.
It doesn't matter.
It's fine. Someone's gotta be here for Nicholas, and it's easiest if I do it. That's all.
You crossed your arms, unwilling to let him wriggle out of your company.
Yeah, sure.
Jorge? Show me something interesting. Jorge gulped but nodded. His gaze bounced between Elizabeth and your standoff with Derek, and he wisely decided to take his leave. He led Elizabeth away, passing by assorted stalls. He seemed to have an idea of where he was going, so you figured he and your sister would probably have a good time. Derek shifted his weight from foot to foot, bouncing around like the floor was on fire. It got more panicked the further away your sister and his brother got without you.
Molly, you have to go. I'm the one who decided not to give him to our parents. It's not your fault. It's mine. You need to go have fun.
There is no fault. You are being overly responsible. I won't. When the other two were completely out of sight, Derek stopped his frantic movement, having spent all his excess nervous energy. You met his gaze head-on, staring at the friend who simply couldn't help himself from being helpful. His face changed into something tense and small. You wondered how many times he did this. Took on all the responsibility so that others didn't have to be bothered. It didn't seem like he was called out on it much. Slowly, he smiled. His grin was tender enough to be genuine.
Well, then, if you're gonna be here anyways, we don't have to make ourselves miserable. It's you and me, and, well, Nicholas time.
You nodded, ready to enjoy your time with Derek.
Alright.
He lifted Nicholas higher and stood tall, ready to take on the world. Then his knees buckled and he blushed.
Can we sit down somewhere?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. After spending all that time searching high and low, both of you needed a break. You both dragged yourselves over to a nearby bench. It was thankfully empty and away from the crowd. Derek took a heavy seat and exhaled deeply. He kept Nicholas clutched close to his chest. It was a familiar motion, one that Derek must have done hundreds of times before. Gosh. I don't even know what to say in the situation. I mean, obviously, but it's not that simple. Your parents are lucky to have you. After you both had settled, Derek carefully reached into his pocket. He struggled to dig around to find what he was searching for.
Uh-huh!
He pulled out his special snack baggie in triumph. It was still completely full, untouched from this morning. Derek tried to pick out some morsels from the bag, but it was even harder to keep Nicholas from flopping over. Can I help? Derek flushed at your offer and became self-conscious over the fact that you noticed his difficulty.
Thanks.
Despite his embarrassment, he passed the snacks to you. You took the bag and he steadied his hold on Nicholas.
Oh, I just need the granola chunks. You can leave the other stuff in there.
Is that your favorite?
Yeah, but no.
You squinted at him in confusion. He laughed cheekily, having expected your reaction.
It's my favorite snack in the bag, but that's not the reason I want it. The other stuff isn't for me. There's a handful of the cereal Nicholas secretly likes, that way he can have something that's not just candies and cookies. I brought the walnuts for Jorge in case we were out too long and he got hungry. And...
He dropped his gaze from you shyly.
Honestly...
You even brought stuff for me, Derek! You used up your precious goodie bag space for other people and not yourself. Stop, please. Oh, I just want to hug this guy so badly.
the crackers are... for you, you know, because maybe you'd get hungry too. That's 4 handfuls.
Gosh. I do kind of want to, like, shake him a little bit. I think it's time. I think it's time. What do I want to do though? Stop doing everything for everyone else, or yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go with this one. And what if you needed more for yourself? Did he not think of that? He'd be starving while holding on to extra snacks for everyone else. I mean, he'd probably just be like, well, if I was hungry, I'd just eat the other stuff. It's like, it may not be my favorite, but it's fine. What had he actually eaten today? You narrowed your eyes and tried to think back to if he'd had anything.
No worries.
It's nothing.
He tried to reassure you and brush off your concern. To him, it wasn't a big deal.
Do you want any crackers? You can take it.
You should eat it. It's your special snack bag.
Okay.
Alright, you can hand it over.
I haven't even opened my snack bag yet. He chuckled and you fished out some granola and crackers. Derek held out his hand and you carefully dropped the snacks into his palm.
Thanks.
He popped one of the tiny oat clusters into his mouth and started chewing. That's it, I'm sharing some of my snacks with you too. You found your baggie and unzipped it. You started snacking along with Derek. Every so often you'd pluck out some more granola from Derek's bag and pass it over between bites. Want some? You held out your baggie in a place where you could just pour it out for Derek if he said yes. His eyes lit up in amusement as he considered your snacks. But he winked at you, a clear sign of the clownery to come.
Sorry.
You suck. You... Derek!
No, those are your snacks. You gotta eat them.
Turnabout was fair play. You'd refused him, so he'd refused you. Both of you leisurely enjoyed the time. The bench was comfortable, the food delicious, and the scenery was busy enough there was always something to watch. The munching and high-pitched snoring served as the only sounds between you for a while. You passed Eric the last cluster of granola. You'd had to really try to get it out of the bag around all the cereal and walnut chunks. He accepted it with great enthusiasm and then took his final bites. He swallowed, satisfied.
Mmm.
He absent-mindedly patted Nicholas's head as he peered up and down the street. Something caught his eye and he lit up.
You know, I was so focused before, I kind of forgot where we were. This is still the boardwalk.
He was as excited as he had been towards the beginning of the day.
Let's go.
Wanna walk around? There's a lot of interesting stuff here, even if we're only looking.
Okay. Derek gave you a thumbs up and then hmmed at Nicholas.
Can you help me move him to my back? That'll be easier for a long haul.
You stood up to help. It took both of you fumbling around, but with effort you were able to get the little boy comfortably on Derek's back. Then you left the bench behind to explore the bustling waterfront park. Without consciously deciding to, you gravitated to the edge of the path closest to the sea. You studied the beautiful ocean, your breath almost taken away by how the water sparkled under the last flickers of sunlight. The evening remained pleasantly warm despite the encroaching darkness. Is it normal for Nicholas to fall asleep like this?
Kind of. Sometimes something is so exciting that Nicholas bounces off the walls just imagining it. By the time he actually gets there, he's already burned himself out. I'm pretty sure Nico didn't sleep at all last night because he knew today was going to be boardwalk day.
Aw, that sucks that he's missing this.
I promise he'll be alright. Nico isn't great at imagining what he might have done if things went different. He lives in the moment. So as long as he wakes up on his own, he won't be a grouchy monster.
I hope Nicholas is at least having good dreams.
Yeah.
I bet he is.
Walking down the boardwalk was peaceful. The conversation was easy with the occasional giggle. Other groups of people passed by. Couples, young friend groups, and families with children all bustled about. You caught slivers of conversations, ranging from the mundane to philosophical. Derek glanced at the faces around him and grinned to himself.
It kinda feels like we're parents and this is our kid.
Yeah? He twisted around to show you Nicholas with amusement. Our next trip should be to a wedding chapel. Yeah. Derek's eyes widened at your shyness. It was contagious. He let out a nervous chuckle.
You know, at least it would if we were, like, old.
You couldn't help but snort over his awkward reversal. He brightened at your levity. As he led you down the boardwalk, you noticed a new skip in his step.
Hey, I have an idea. Let's ride the Ferris wheel. We've officially given up on getting our parents, and even Nico can do that.
Yeah. Derek let out a whoop and turned around like it was a little happy dance. You laughed, charmed by his enthusiasm. You both eagerly made your way through the crowd to get in line for the one ride that was an option for you. Derek cautiously weaved past people, making sure... Excuse me. Ugh. Felt like I needed a burp, sorry. Making sure no one accidentally bumped into Nicholas on the way. The line was short, and it didn't take long for you to start boarding the ride. I've only been on a Ferris wheel once. I went with my mom when I was a kid, and my mom is terrified of heights. My brother was supposed to go with us, but he chickened out at the finish line. So it was just me and my mom held on to the rails and screamed the entire ride. But she went with me, so you know what? Thanks, Mom, for toughing it out for your daughter. I was like, wee, Ferris wheel. You piled into the cabin, and Derek placed Nicholas in the corner of the metal bench. He sat next to him. Nicholas snuffled when he was jostled, but didn't wake. Derek wrapped his arm around him to secure him from falling forward. Nicholas unconsciously leaned his head over to rest on him. You rested on the bench across from them, eye to eye with Derek. It felt sturdy under you. Derek's grin widened and he tapped his toes together as he waited for the ride to start. And it did. The carriage car rocked forward. Slowly you ascended into the sky. You could see the entire expanse of the boardwalk from the cabin. It was an amazing sight. From this height, the stalls and decorations looked like a magical land of toys. You glanced at Derek, curious if he was enjoying the view too. The sun had continued to sink as the Ferris wheel rose, and the light that reached inside the cabin through the little window was low. Sharp-edged shadows cut across Derek's body. He'd stopped shuffling his feet and switched to tapping a finger against the top of his knee in a jittery, uneven beat. With Nicholas still sound asleep, it felt like you were alone with Derek. In the small space, high in the air, with no one else anywhere around, you made one more attempt to get Derek to be open with you. If he wouldn't do it now, then when would he? Derek, I know it's kind of awkward to keep talking about it, but I am kind of worried. You began to list your points of concern, and the whole thing sounded even more unreasonable when said in a single sentence. You got the face paint Nicholas wanted. You picked out snacks for other people. You gave up your own chance to have fun today so our parents could go on a bike ride. Why don't you do things for yourself? He shrunk under the accusation like the walls were bending in on him.
Well...
It's not like I can't ever do things for me. I do sometimes. I went to the summer soiree instead of hanging out with my family.
You weren't convinced, and spelled that out with the furrow of your brow and the tight line of your mouth. Derek acted the scolded child and hung his head in shame, but he felt compelled to fill the uncomfortable silence your reaction had left.
It's easier to do things for other people than to try to fight for something just for me. And that makes everything easier for other people too.
You almost spoke out in his defense, to declare that he should stand up for what he needed, but you held it back. Derek was finally expressing himself, and you didn't want to interrupt. He rambled on, trying to sort out his thoughts and arrange the words in a way that made sense to both you and himself.
I don't know.
I like thinking about the people I love. I really seriously do like doing stuff that makes them happy. I don't want to have to stop doing any of that.
Derek tightened his hands into fists. His words were earnest, and he directed them straight towards you with unwavering eye contact.
I mean it, even though it's annoying sometimes. Annoying for me and whoever tries to stick with me.
However, as true as it was, his resoluteness fizzled out almost immediately. Derek timidly sunk down in his seat. He brushed his little brother's bangs away from his closed eyes. It was a nervous, momentary distraction. Nicholas offered him some emotional support just by being there. When Derek spoke again, it was in a tiny voice.
Maybe.
But maybe part of me is sort of hoping that instead of having to do more for myself and less for others, somebody would try to do things for me, too. Then it'd be even.
This conversation's hitting a little too close to home. Derek shifted shyly. His head was still low, but his gaze shifted up to you.
It's kind of like a dream or something that I've got. And if I'm not doing that for anyone else, how am I going to find someone who will do it for me? I can't ask for stuff that not even I'd want to give.
Your eyebrows shot up, but the rest of your body froze in place. Derek turned his face towards the window. It wasn't enough to cover the way his cheeks had reddened.
My family cares about me, obviously, but a lot of the time that's the thing I need help with.
With a laugh, Derek liberally tousled the hair of the beloved pain in his side who laid there, the youngest brother remaining blissfully unaware of the trouble he caused. The humor in his tone left Derek as quickly as it had appeared. He couldn't get away from how serious the topic was, or how much it truly meant to him.
It'd be cool to have somebody who was on my side and who liked me because of me. Not because they're family and are supposed to love me.
For a single instant, his eyes met yours, but then he instantly focused on the world outside the scuffed, clouded window of the old Ferris wheel. You could see a lopsided grin reflected in the glass.
Don't tell my bros I imagine some pretty dumb things.
I'm sure that dream will come true for you. Oh my goodness. It is so hard, though, because I totally get what he's saying. Like, yes, you know, of course, it's reasonable to be like, hey, you can't receive what you don't give out. You can't just, like, take. But also, you can't just give constantly either. Like, there has to be a balance, and it is so hard to have that balance, especially when you do enjoy making people happy. And I've also been in that position, like with Derek, that, you know, you have hopes for yourself, but they get dashed, and so you keep wrestling with the fact of, like, I should just be responsible, then I don't have these hopes and wants, and then they don't get dashed, and then everything's fine, and everybody can be happy that way. But it's like, oh man, it just sucks. It's so hard to, like, have healthy wants and boundaries and stuff where you're not just giving all the time, and, like, make time for yourself so that you have the energy to do things for yourself that you enjoy. I definitely did not have any of this figured out at 13. I don't have it figured out yet at 31. Hey, my numbers are reversed. That's cool. But I'm at least cognizant of the fact now. But at 13, I like either this one or this one. Do I lean into it, though? I don't know. At 13, I probably wouldn't have leaned into it, so... It's not dumb. That's normal and nice.
Thanks.
The foggy face you can make out in the window pane trembled. He wasn't ready to show it directly, but you were glad you still got a glimpse of it. He grasped the top of one knee and took in a deep breath through his nose. When he exhaled, he carefully laid out a few more words for consideration.
Hey, Molly... Is there somebody that you think...
Without thinking, you leaned forward towards him. You were hanging on his words like the cabin you were seated in was suspended from the wheel. But he never placed the last part.
Forget it.
Derek!
Never mind.
No, you can't leave it there. You're killing me. You can ask me anything, if you want to.
Don't worry about that. But thanks. You're great. It was just this idea I've been kicking around, but I should probably think about it a little more. A lot more. Besides.
Derek shrugged an arm and cocked his head down to the extra bit of company who was still gently snoring.
It's kinda awkward to talk about all this personal stuff with my baby brother right here, even if he is asleep.
I wonder if he's alluding to that confession we get from him when summer ends, maybe, possibly. He chuckled good-naturedly, moving his hand to scratch behind his ear.
Maybe I can try again later.
The back of his foot knocked against the lower wall of the outcropping metal seat on repeat. It sounded the end of that conversation, but that didn't mean nothing else was on his mind. Derek was always considering something, and most of the time it was other people. Things someone else might have missed or forgotten weren't taken for granted by him.
Thanks for helping with the snacks before.
That piece of appreciation was given easily. The next, though, was far meeker.
And thanks for coming with me.
Of course. Anytime, Derek. This time, Derek shared his bright and bashful face directly with you. You could always count on him, that was a certainty, and Derek knew that the sentiment was mutual. You would look out for him whether he did it for himself or not, whether he asked you to or not, and whether he wanted you to or not. That was just as sure. Not much more was said before the ride came to its steady, inevitable end. You disembarked from the cabin with Nicholas securely in Derek's arms. He strolled from the exit to the nearest stall to ask the employee what time it was. 8 p.m. was quickly approaching.
We better go to the meetup place. Can you help me get Nico on my back again?
How about I carry him now?
Oh!
Instinctively, Derek pulled back. He clung tighter to his youngest brother, keeping the weight of that burden squarely on himself. You waited, calm and stable. Ultimately, the tension in his face and the hesitancy in his heart faded, and he accepted your offer graciously.
That'd actually be great. Thanks, Molly.
Derek shifted his grip on Nicholas before he propped the small boy over your shoulders. You tucked your elbows around Nico's knees and hunched over so he wouldn't slip off. Nicholas draped heavily on your back like a fluffy car-patterned cape. He really wasn't that heavy, but you could easily imagine how carrying that extra load could get tiresome after a while. Derek definitely needed a break. I've been waiting for hours to carry that boy. Like, please let me help.
Perfect.
Together, you wandered across the path. The people surrounding you were full of enthusiasm, bustling from ride to ride and store to store, but a quiet peace had settled between you and Derek. Your day at the boardwalk was already coming to an end. The sky had gone completely dark by the time you reached the meeting spot, but the world around you was still awash with light. Street lamps bore down on you while spotlights shot upwards to illuminate the biggest rides. You and Derek huddled at the side of the path. You wanted to stay out of the way of other visitors who were trickling off to the parking lot and the ones who were rushing the opposite way for a last-minute excursion on the boardwalk. You hoped the strangers enjoyed themselves, but for you and Derek, plus the sleepy Nicholas, there was nowhere to go. At least not until you caught sight of your currently missing family members.
I figured.
We beat them.
Yeah. You used the break as an opportunity to readjust Nicholas. He'd started to slide a bit during the trip over. Since there were only 2 awake members of your group, you both wordlessly kept your eyes peeled. Every figure approaching in the distance was scrutinized and then disregarded as just another stranger. That process repeated for a few minutes, but eventually 2 shadowed forms coming down the path stepped under a light, and you immediately recognized them.
Jorge, Elizabeth!
I like that the kids were the most responsible, like, we're here at the meeting place. The parents, where are they? Who knows? Derek jumped and waved his hands over his head. He was entirely free to draw attention to himself that way, thanks to you taking over piggybacking Nicholas. Even on the other end of the boardwalk, you could tell Elizabeth was smirking. She got face painted? Stop! What adventure did you 2 go on? Ah, I love it! That's great! When Derek's brother and your sister rejoined you in front of the first stall, you were proven right. She definitely had a leering smirk.
Mm-hmm.
It's very cute that you're taking a turn with the precious baby.
Oh,
Derek barked out a laugh. Elizabeth's smile wasn't the only notable thing on her face, and even Derek wasn't polite enough to let her get away with it.
maybe, but what's that on your forehead?
The oldest kid hadn't returned exactly the same way you'd left her. She now had a bright white golf ball emblazed on her skin with non-toxic water-soluble paint. You went back to the face painting stall? After just a small huff, Elizabeth plainly laid out her case. I love how smug Jorge is looking through this entire exchange. Jorge and I talked a little about sports we liked. When I told him I did golf, he suggested I get face paint at that. I did, and it was fun. Her chin was high and she spoke with defiance. Elizabeth absolutely refused to be embarrassed by her change of mind. Jorge stood at your sister's side and proudly took credit for the accomplishment. Well done, Jorge.
She didn't want to do it before because she was just being an Elizabeth brat.
Oh, the sass!
Huh?
Nice try.
Better than being a Borge. Whoa, when did you two become best friends? Jorge and Elizabeth chuckled at the quips. Apparently, they had unique nicknames for one another now. It left Derek nearly speechless.
Wow.
I'm with you, man. Clearly, you and Derek weren't the only ones who went through a bonding experience this evening. I feel like I'm being replaced. You are. Sorry. Haha. Tell that to our moms. I think I could convince them to adopt Jorge. Tell that to Jorge's parents. Lighthearted laughter drifted around the group. Whether you were divided up or all together, the Suarez and Wave Rider kids enjoyed each other's company. Your sister then exhaled calmly and followed it with a sage nod. I'll take Nicolas now.
Oh.
Whether Derek was going to agree or disagree with the offer, you didn't know, but Elizabeth didn't give him the chance. She wasn't suggesting what he thought she was. We've got like 10 or 15 minutes left. The two of you should use it.
What?
You want us to leave him with you?
Uh-huh. Wow, Elizabeth. Look at you. I'm so proud of you. Derek took a hesitant step back and turned his face away. His expression tensed the same way it had when he first realized Nico was going to be asleep for the rest of the trip.
Nicolas is gonna be mad if I'm not there.
The resistance was a weak mumble, and his middle brother spoke with much more boldness.
Nicolas isn't gonna know, and what he doesn't know won't kill him. Jorge!
Derek was at a loss on where that had come from. You hadn't expected it either. Jorge was never the rule bender. He must have missed even more than you thought during his time with Elizabeth. Come on, Boric, live a little. Will there really be time for that before our parents get here? Elizabeth pressed a hand over the golf ball on her forehead. She groaned loud enough that she could have convinced someone passing by she had a massive migraine. But that was not the actual source of her strain.
Jeez.
You're both menaces of socially polite behavior, and you need to be stopped. Go have fun for Pete's sake. She's right about that, though.
Yeah, hurry! You have to do stuff at the boardwalk while we're at the boardwalk.
He shyly scuffed his sneaker on the ground with a doe-eyed expression that was more expected from Nicolas. It was exceedingly rare for anyone to tell Derek what the plan was. He was used to coming up with all the ideas and taking charge. Derek glanced at you. It was impossible not to smile at him.
All right.
I'll do it.
Okay. Finally! There was a quick passing of the buck as Elizabeth took Nicolas into her hands. She carefully positioned his head against her shoulder and cradled his legs under her forearms. Derek found the hold satisfactory and entrusted his youngest brother to her, the same way he'd let her borrow the responsibility of watching out for Jorge. Alright, Derek, let's go! Quick, quick, quick! No more time was wasted. You shot off down the boardwalk one more time. The flow of traffic had shifted even more from when you'd started waiting, with everyone except for you moving towards the exit. You pushed against the tide into the heart of the park. Side by side. We're gonna be out of sync hand in hand. Neither of you wanted to be separated in the crowd, so you stuck right by the other. Your feet and heart were beating hard. Derek shouted over the sound in a breathless, thrilled voice.
The lines are all gonna be short this late, but I don't think we can do two. Which one do you want to do? Or we don't have to go on a ride at all.
Ooh, yeah. I want to do what you want to do.
Oh. Could we do the roller coaster?
Definitely. That's good, because I wanted to do the roller coaster too.
Okay.
Alright.
The joy in his cheer betrayed how disappointed he must have really been to miss out on the roller coaster before. I was bummed too, so that's good, yay! He had put on a brave face before, and in the end had the chance to get his due reward. You would make certain that he got on that ride. You and Derek sped straight to your goal. You couldn't help but tilt your head back every so often as the roller coaster loomed closer. As Derek had theorized, the line wasn't even half the length it was for most of the day. It only took a few minutes before you were on the platform and awaiting your ride. And even better, you got the very front seats on the coaster. Let's go! You jumped into the cart along with Derek and pulled the safety bar down in front of you. He was bursting with anticipation, so the restraints were especially useful. A clicking sound like the winding of a clock chimed out and the ride began its gradual climb upward. It reached the summit, and after an appropriately stomach-tightening pause, it rolled over the edge. Cool summer air rushed over your face and whipped your hair as you descended at breakneck speed. Derek threw his arms into the air as he squealed in delight.
Woo!
You were jostled in your seat, vibrating with the motion of the coaster. Derek and you took turns knocking into the other around every bend. You both laughed every time. When you came to a jarring stop back at the station, you lifted off the restraint together and made your exit down the other side of the ride. Derek ruffled his hands through his hair to straighten out his characteristic spikes. He was absolutely beaming on the way out. Derek stared at the sparkling stars beyond the glitz and clamor of the boardwalk. There was a peace between you that hadn't been there at any other moment during your trip.
Phew.
Hey.
His eyes had stolen the shine from the cosmos when he placed his gaze back on you. Oh, really now?
It was way too awkward to talk about this before with my little brother right there. But I just want to say I really like hanging out with you, Molly. I love my brothers and parents a ton, and my other friends are great too. But when I have to pick someone to team up with, I think about you.
Aw, that's so sweet. He shrugged his shoulders with a shy grin. Derek was someone you could count on for honesty, but sometimes it still surprised you what he was capable of. I can get why you didn't admit that earlier. What do I want to do? Yeah, this one. I'd partner with you anytime.
Oh, cool.
Getting the chance to spend some time with truly just the two of you was more than you could have hoped for. You owed Elizabeth one. Despite taking an entire extra jaunt around the boardwalk, you still arrived at the entrance before your parents. Where are those guys? However, there had been a shift in the group. Nicholas was awake! As soon as Derek noticed the small third figure standing by Elizabeth and Jorge, he started like he was hit by a bolt. He made a break for his siblings, and you were right behind him. The notion was not exactly subtle, and it caught the attention of the boy in question. He let out a shout when he saw your rapid approach. Well, technically it wasn't your arrival that had an impact.
Derek's back!
Nicholas sprinted away from the meeting spot, not willing to wait a single second for the reunion. He crashed into Derek, wrapping his arms around his brother's thighs and sticking his head in the space between Derek's legs.
Oof.
It was powerful enough to knock Derek off balance. He had to swing his arms out to the side to stop his wobbling. Once he was sure he wasn't going to topple over, Derek bent down and scooped up his hanger-on. Seeing Derek carrying Nicholas felt extremely familiar by this point, considering that had been the case for the entire afternoon. But Derek wasn't sick of it yet. He could handle it for a little longer. Derek nudged his head towards the other two members of your party, encouraging you to come. Together, you and Derek walked the rest of the way to the boardwalk entrance, while Nicholas clung on to Derek the whole way. Jorge waved you over.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Hey.
And the moment you were in whispering distance, you were greeted by a hushed message from your own big sibling. Good job. Oh, thank you. She put a finger to her cheek and smirked. What? Why a finger to her cheek and smirking? What are you saying, Elizabeth? Derek slowly kneeled to let Nicholas get down. The little boy stood on his own 2 feet, but his 2 hands didn't detach. They only grasped the hem of Derek's jersey instead. While brushing his brother's messy hair, Derek glanced up at Nico's temporary babysitters. He stared at them questioningly. What happened was the obvious unspoken question. He's only been up for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And he was really grumpy at first because you weren't there. But we got him talking about the dream adventure he had when he was sleeping to keep him busy, and that worked. It was really funny, and Nico had a good time too.
Jorge beamed with pride at the success, and you noticed how much closer he stood to Elizabeth. Doll. Your sister accepted his company just as welcomingly. They were their own partners in crime for the day.
Right.
I'm basically positive that after about 5 seconds, he stopped telling us his actual dreams and was making it all up. But it was cute. Derek blinked at the two as if he had witnessed a miracle. It kind of was, in a small way. He was able to pass the mantle of responsibility and everything turned out fine. However, Elizabeth and Jorge wouldn't be replacing Derek anytime soon, or likely ever. But for a moment, for one beautiful moment, Nicholas may have behaved for a bit, but now that his biggest brother was here, the young lad wanted to be taken care of. His gaze dropped to the ground as he pulled at the end of Derek's shirt.
Derek, my tummy hurts. I want an ice cream.
No ice cream, Nico. That's not gonna help your stomach.
But
You can have some of my snacks. I saved you part of it.
Derek's tone really sold the idea. It was full of appeal from the fact it was his snacks. He could hype up a product better than any of the employees running games on the boardwalk. Nicholas brightened immediately. He clasped his own collar and leaned his head all the way back to look up at his brother's face from where he stood against Derek's legs. He wasn't kept waiting long. Derek pulled the baggie out of his pocket and sifted through the mix of walnuts and cereal to pick out the treat especially chosen for Nico. Once he'd collected a small handful, he passed it over to Nicholas, carefully dropping the round cereal puffs one by one. In Nicholas's tiny palm, the amount was almost overflowing. Nicholas gratefully received the offering. He shoved the whole thing into his face and ate directly out of his hand. It reminded you of feeding oats to a pony, except in this case, Nicholas was both the feeder and the fed. Derek nodded in satisfaction and rolled the bag over in his palm.
Jorge, these are for you.
Jorge's eyes like, whoa! He gathered the last wayward pieces of cereal and then offered the well-worn bag of nothing but walnuts to the middle child.
It's been a really long day, and there's still the ride back. You should eat something.
Jorge didn't argue with that. He gladly accepted his brother's thoughtful gesture.
thank you.
Jorge plucked out just one from the pack, the hardiest-looking nut in the bunch, and took a bite out of it. His gaze shifted towards Elizabeth, or Elizabeth as Jorge knew her as he swallowed his snack. Then he asked a question.
Do you want any?
Thanks.
You know what? I would. Elizabeth was the third person who took a turn of opening up a hand to receive a snack. Jorge shook a few of the nuts into her awaiting palm.
Derek, you and Molly can have some too.
Nicholas's fingers remained pushed against his mouth, but his distinct chomping stopped. He spoke muffled words filtered through a handful of half-crushed cereal.
Okay. I can share too.
He stuck his sticky palm up towards Derek's face instead of his own. The gesture had crumbs cascading down his shirt. Nico couldn't reach high enough to get it all the way to his brother's mouth. Derek shook with giggles and poked Nicholas's wrist to nudge the pile of soggy cereal away. He had to take a second to breathe before he could explain himself.
I've got some of the cereal right here. That'll be from you. Thanks, Nicholas. I'm gonna eat it.
That logic seemed sound to Nicholas, or maybe just seeing his brother smile made Nicholas smile too. Either way, he accepted that not taking more of the cereal counted as him sharing it. Thank goodness. But he wasn't done. Nicholas turned around on a dime, arm still outstretched, and positioned his hand towards you. Amazingly, he wanted to share with someone other than Derek. Aww. You kiddos are all way too nice. It's pretty gross. Yeah, I would think it'd be very sweet. You knew he was trying to be nice, and that was adorable. Before Nicholas could start flinging bits of cereal at you in his eagerness to share, a warm voice boomed above the din of the busy boardwalk.
Good evening, family and friends.
Oh, look who it is! The irresponsible parents. Where have you guys been? It was Mr. Suarez. And not only him, you spotted all four of the parents weaving their way through the crowd.
We're here.
The sight of his mommy and daddy made Nicholas forget all about feeding you his pre-chewed snack. Phew. He smashed the remaining cereal into his mouth so he could use both his hands to wave at his parents.
Dad, Mom!
Derek called back with equal excitement. The parents picked up the pace and came to gather around their children. Greetings were shared between adults and kids. Immediately, Ma noted the face paint that was now adorning your group.
Wonderful.
Those look wonderful. So creative.
Nicholas forced himself to swallow the mouthful. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. He sucked in a huge breath, pointed to his cheek, and screeched.
Ah! That's a spider! There's a spider!
Oh no, you're right. It is a spider. My goodness, it's terrifying.
Be careful.
Don't make any quick movements, kiddo. It might bite you.
Yes.
Wait there. I will help you, son.
Mr. Suarez gave Nico's chubby cheek a pinch to get rid of the dangerous arachnid. He retracted his hand in shock when he realized it was in fact only paint. Nicholas snickered gleefully at the hubbub among the grown-ups. Mission accomplished. Mrs. Suarez then clasped her hands together and changed the topic.
Well, everyone, I'm sorry you beat us here. Hopefully you weren't waiting too long.
This is gonna be great.
Nah, it was fine.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate you waiting here for us. We went on a very lovely bike ride across the boardwalk.
Really?
You were out there pedaling around on bikes?
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth's and Jorge's faces of genuine surprise at the news helped to distract from the awkward, knowing glances you shared with Derek.
Returning them was a real hassle. That's why we got here late. Definitely worth it, though. It was. And did you children have a good day?
Nicholas threw his hands in the air to answer with full force.
Yeah!
Derek softly patted his littlest brother's head. His voice was much quieter and distinctly relieved.
Yeah.
You, Jorge, and Elizabeth nodded and offered your own points of agreement. It might not have gone as you had imagined, but none of you would consider it a waste of time. It was an experience worth having.
That's great.
I'm sure you made the most of what you had, but we better get going. It is very late. Perhaps we should pick dinner up on the way home. Absolutely. It's been hours since we left, and Nicholas can always sleep in the car since we won't be home before bedtime either way.
All the kids, except for Nicholas, had their face go completely flat, and Elizabeth snorted. Mrs. Suarez didn't miss that instant reaction. She raised a brow. Derek straightened the bands on his wrist and broke the news to his mom. There was a glint of amusement in his eyes.
Sorry, Mom, I don't think that's gonna happen.
Nicholas remained oblivious to the discussion going on about him. He was leaping and bounding from board to board, completely refreshed. His mother frowned. It was obvious to her what had occurred. Mr. Suarez was unflustered. He shared some dignified optimism.
Well then.
He'll be up to keep us company.
True.
We'll all be together.
Those words reached the small ears of the youngest person there. Nicholas held onto Derek's abdomen, liking the sound of that promise. His older brother looked down at him warmly.
Good job, team.
Glad to have you back, Nico. And Jorge, you're such a reliable bro.
He wrapped one arm around Nicolas and reached over to pull his other brother into the hug. Jorge welcomed and reciprocated the embrace. Down. The Suarez trio snuggled together in a tight squeeze, and their flaking face paint rubbed off on each other. Your gaze wandered from the public display of affection and went to your older sister. Elizabeth was definitely not a hugger, but you whispered your own siblingly appreciation for her. Thanks, Elizabeth, for watching Nicolas. She gave a smug flip of her hair. Forget it. I owed you one after your grand stunt for me on Daddy Day. Aw, she remembered. Me and Molly and Gay are like, aw. Aw, Elizabeth.
Let's go.
That was all that needed to be said. Your completed party took their final steps on the boardwalk, heading straight towards the parking lot. Mrs. Suarez was leading the pack.
Mom! Hey, Mom!
Nicolas shouted and waved to get his mother's attention from behind while still using one hand to grip Derek.
Guess what? Lisbeth carried me!
She did? That's so considerate. Lisbeth.
Oh.
Lisbeth! Your moms were walking arm in arm, sharing hushed commentary with each other a distance from the group and tittering over what they heard. You're so sweet, Lisbeth. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna share that I also carried you. I carried you too, when you were sleeping.
Really?
Really? And it was longer than Elizabeth did.
Wow!
I feel that who carried Nicolas the most today should get the biggest say in what we have for dinner.
Alright, that's Derek.
My thoughts exactly.
I'd second that.
Sounds fair to me. Then we all agree.
I'd guess this means Derek will be our dinner decider for the night. Yay!
Maybe.
Probably.
Derek scratched at the spider on his cheek and chuckled airily. He shrugged without comment and simply continued to walk. His little brothers stayed at Derek's sides, and they bumped along together. You strolled with Elizabeth while the parents surrounded the sets of siblings at the front and from behind. Derek's hands were full with Nicolas and Jorge, but he snuck a fond glance over at you. None of his excitement had faded. The night was still young and bright, and you knew you could count on every person there. Despite being miles away from Sunset Bird, you felt right at home. Aww. So sweet. That was a great moment to end on. Definitely. Definitely. Thank you guys for suggesting to do that last. That was awesome. So wholesome. Oh, Derek. so responsible. Alright, well. Next time, summer ends, and we got a little bit of a confession thing going on, so that'll be exciting. Hopefully I'll see you there, guys.